Good afternoon and welcome to DCR's monthly Q&A virtual lunch hour. I'm your host, Jason Colleen. Thank you all for joining us. I do want to remind folks that we are still accepting social equity individual applicant verification requests. The filing deadline is 4 p.m. on Tuesday, April 1st. Monday, March 31st is a city holiday. If you need some resources about how you can go ahead and register or some of the questions associated with the SEIA verification process. Up on the screen, I do have links to our webinar, and we did also do a CEQA NOE webinar this year. So if folks have questions about the CEQA and the NOE process, you can refer to that webinar for additional resources. With that, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Good afternoon. Our first question comes from Nakia G. When will cultivation licenses become available to social equity applicants again?
We anticipate that we will accept applications on a first come, first served basis sometime later this year. I anticipate that sometime in the summer is when that application type will be available to verified social equity applicants.
Our next question comes from the initials SM and S. What exact number goes into the DCR record number box for a modification? I can't get it to work.
The full record number. So a record, when we say DCR core record number, that's the 6-digit numerical value in the middle of a record number. When we say DCR record number, that's the entire record number. So it'll start with a LA, and then it'll end with ANN, pre-app, LIC, etc. There are only certain record types that can be modified. So we don't accept modifications on a pre-app record, for instance. So if you're trying to modify a pre-app record, the system's not going to allow that. For an annual license record, a record that ends in ANN, the record has to have been deemed filed before certain modification types can be accepted, and other modification types require the issuance of a license. So please refer to our website. And again, if you have questions about the DCR record number, please go ahead and email your analyst because they can assist you as well.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Blake H. When will annual licenses be given out for people that have finalized all their temporary approvals and paid their annual license renewal fee?
It's going to depend. It'll depend on whether or not you have an existing state provisional license. If you do not have an existing state provisional license, you weren't eligible for a fee waiver of the environmental review fees. So once you are invoiced and pay your environmental review fees, we would go ahead and complete the environmental analysis. And then and only then will we be able to make a recommendation to either issue an annual license or to deny the application record. We will be issuing invoices for the environmental review fees next month, and they'll be due by the end of June.
Moving on, Daryl C. I was qualified in 2019 as a Tier 1 and Tier 2. Are there any more licenses or financial assistance available to a person like me?
Having been verified in 2019, you would be eligible to participate in the Phase 3 Retail Round 3 lottery later this year in December. You'll be able to register for the lottery in the summer when it opens up. social equity applicants are able to apply for the Type 9, the non-storefront delivery, nursery, cultivation activities later this year, manufacturing, distribution. Um, when you say financial assistance, we're not providing direct financial assistance to applicants, but we do have grant monies and we are able to provide grant waivers for certain application related fees.
A question from Darwin B. Does DCR review leases that might be predatory?
DCR does not review contractual agreements between a landlord and a tenant. So we are not making determinations of whether or not we think a lease may be predatory.
Our next question from Richard A. What are the requirements for the social equity program and how do I register?
To be verified as a social equity individual applicant, you need to meet certain criteria. We are currently accepting social equity individual applicant verification requests through 4 p.m. on Tuesday, April 1st. There are information and links on our website about that. If you've been verified as a social equity individual applicant, there are different benefits and resources that would be available to you. You can email our social equity team. And additionally, if you have been verified, you're not looking for individual services, you're planning to apply for a license, we may have grant monies that can be used to provide application fee waivers. So please reach out to the social equity program team if you've already been verified. And if you haven't been verified, in order to access these benefits or resources, you'll have to get verified first. And we are accepting verification requests through 4 p.m. on April 1st.
The next question from Darwin B. Why doesn't DCR provide group session classes on taxation?
So verified social equity individual applicants have access to the learning management system. Within the learning management system, there are webinars associated with calculating taxes. And a member of the team may be able to provide a link. I know the social equity team with one of our coaches just did a webinar about taxation and how to prepare to remit taxes and audits, etc. So there are courses like that.
Ken S. Can we lease another location for our retail dispensary and have it approved so that we don't have to shut down our existing location if both are in the same zone?
You can submit a business premises modification request. If your business premises relocation is approved, then you would be able to continue operating at your current location for up to 180 days. And provided that your current location does not buffer out another applicant, you may be eligible to renew operations at the existing location in 90-day increments. But at a minimum, you would only have up to 180 days to continue operating at your current location. Effectively, once you've gone through the initial review for land use, you'll have to make a decision about whether or not you want to move forward with the relocation. But conceivably, you could go through the land use review, get authorized to submit a new application for your new proposed location without having to shut down your existing location.
A question from Fabio F. Have there been any movement with policy to allow a 51% phase 3 round 1 applicant to transfer their ownership stake to their 49% operating partner?
To date, there has not been any policy movement on that issue.
Question from David B. Can a social equity person with a violent crime conviction be approved for a cannabis license if he will not be the primary personnel? If not, what are the options to get a license of any type, and what type of license? Also, is 20 years wait the only option for a violent conviction person that are social equity qualified?
So if you're an owner, which means you have 20% or more of the equity in the business, you're also a primary personnel. The code does call out what types of convictions, whether it's a violent crime or a white collar crime, that would preclude you from being eligible to be an owner or primary personnel on a commercial cannabis license for a period of time. So, depending on the type of conviction, we don't have the latitude to digress from what's in the municipal code. So if you were convicted of a violent crime that makes you ineligible for 20 years, DCR does not have the discretion to circumvent that. And, you know, even if you're not acting in a primary personnel role, if you have a 20% more equity stake in the entity, you are by definition also a primary personnel, which would make you ineligible.
Thank you, Jason. Next question from Lizzie W. I don't qualify for social equity. How may I pursue a legal license and permit?
DCR is accepting applications from general applicants for testing, distribution, non-volatile manufacturing, and the cultivation processor, and will begin accepting applications from general applicants in 2026 for other activity types.
From Sean B. Is it possible to do an entity substitution of a temporary approval and not experience a lapse in licensure at the state level? If so, how does that work? Since there will be a period in time where Company A owns the state license while Company B owns the city license. Do I just coordinate with my analyst and DCC?
I mean, first and foremost, you're going to have to coordinate with the state on this particular issue, because the state will require you to submit a application for the new entity. And then, of course, at the local level, if you are eligible to submit an entity substitution, you'll have to submit a new application for that entity. And you can't get your corresponding state license unless you're a social equity entity and the activity type is type 10 or type 9, which means that we would have to issue an annual license, which would require you to cancel your temporary approval under the old entity, which would then enable you to meet the requirements to get your state annual. So I would start with the state to see what they would recommend for your specific situation before trying to coordinate with your analyst, because based on our understanding of the state process, there's not a way to prevent at least a little lapse in licensure at the local and state level.
Elvia H asks, I was cleared as social equity for the first lottery. How do I make sure I am entered into the one coming up?
So in order to participate in the round 3 lottery in December, you will have to register for that lottery in the summer. And we'll have more information being released about when we'll begin accepting lottery registrations in April. So stay tuned for that email communication. Once we wrap up the verification filing period and we know how many verification requests have been submitted, we'll be able to kind of anticipate what that workload is going to be and when will be completed, but we do anticipate opening up the lottery registration sometime in the summer, and we intend to make an announcement next month.
Question from Shady M. Can you review the specific requirements for low income qualification for SEIA verification, please?
I would refer you to the webinars that we've previously done on the social equity individual applicant verification process. For low income, there is a definition within Municipal Code Section 10420, and you're going to have to know, what tax year you're using. You're going to have to look at your gross income. You're going to have to look at your household size. And then, depending on the metropolitan area you live in, HUD has different income thresholds for each of the metropolitan areas within the United States. So basically, you have to meet the legal definition for low income based on your household size and within the metropolitan area based on the HUD standards. So those are kind of the variables that you have to look at. I would refer you to prior webinars as well as to the municipal code for the exact definitions. And of course, what's going to be considered low income will differ from person to person based on where they live, based on their household size, and then based, of course, on their financial situation. There's also an asset attestation. So your assets can't exceed 4 times the income threshold for your applicable household. And then, of course, there's certain things that are considered assets for the purposes of that calculation. And there are other things like your primary residence, provided you live there, which would not be included in that calculation. So please refer to the prior webinars and please refer to the municipal code for the exact technical definitions.
Richard A. asks, if you have documents from the 2022 verification window but were not verified, can you use the same Excel documents from before, or would you have to submit new ones? New ones per the criteria for 2025 if those documents qualify for this verification process.
You will have to create a new verification request record for 2025. As part of that record, you will have to submit documentation. Documentation previously submitted will not be automatically added to the record. So whatever documents you submit are the documents that folks are going to review on your 2025 record. Income related documents are going to have to be updated because we're looking at income from either calendar year 2023 or 2024. Your cannabis related arrest or conviction are not time bounded. So, to the extent that you upload that same document to your 2025 request, it may meet the criteria.
A question from Kayan B. Will round 1 have seniority to licensing?
I don't quite understand the question. For the 200, individuals that were eligible to participate in phase 3 retail round 1, those folks have had the opportunity to submit an application and pursue licensure. For the lottery we'll be conducting at the end of this year, applicants will have the same chance of being selected to submit an application. But folks will have to register for the lottery and then we'll conduct the lottery, and the folks that get selected get selected. But folks that participated in earlier rounds or earlier lotteries will not have seniority or any preferential treatment over any other applicant.
Uh, Question again from Kayan. If you were vetted in the first verification round and not approved in the second round, are you still eligible for the lottery and SEIA benefits?
If you were verified as a social equity individual applicant in 2019, but were not approved as a social equity individual applicant in 2022, you would be eligible to apply for the 2025 lottery. As a verified social equity individual applicant, you can reach out to the social equity team to see what types of benefits you are eligible for based on your status and whether or not you're a current applicant or licensee. But if you were verified in 2019, you would be eligible to register for the lottery later this year, even if you were not verified in 2022.
Question from Jorge T. How would a phase 3 round 1 applicant whose application is abandoned but able to refile if the original applicant entity that was originally applied as no longer exists?
An application may only be refiled as the original applicant entity at this point. So if the original applicant entity no longer exists, you can pursue reinstatement of that entity with the state of California. But if you try to refile as a different entity, your refile record will be deemed ineligible.
Also from Jorge T. Does DCR still hold stakeholder meetings? If so, where can we find the schedule for meetings?
The social equity team has stakeholder meetings that take place quarterly, and they have a roster of members that encompass that stakeholder group. The Q&A sessions, webinars, the Cannabis Regulation Commission, or other opportunities for stakeholders to provide input that can be considered as part of policy determination and policy recommendations.
Question from Ivan D. Regarding social equity verification, if I only receive Social Security disability benefits and do not pay taxes, can I submit a verification letter from Social Security to show proof of low income?
A letter from Social Security would not be sufficient evidence for proof of low income. At a minimum, you would have to request a document from the Internal Revenue Service to demonstrate that you did not file taxes in either calendar year 2023 or 2024. The webinars that we've produced have links to the 4005 T form. And if we can have somebody pull it up and drop it into the Google Meet chat, we can make that available. But there is a link in prior webinar documents, and that would be the only letter we would accept in terms of proof of low income.
Question from Janet L. How do I obtain a license to sell cannabis through the food industry?
If you're going to manufacture or distribute cannabis products, you'll need that license type. And then ultimately the business that's going to sell those cannabis infused products to the end consumer would need to have a type 10 or a type 9 license. If you're thinking about like on-site consumption or something along those lines, at this moment, DCR does not accept applications for on-site consumption. But at a minimum, if you're distributing cannabis or you're making products that include cannabis, you would need either the distribution and or the non-volatile manufacturing license type for yourself.
This question comes from Jay. What current efforts are in place to combat unlicensed dispensaries in the city of Los Angeles?
I'm going to ask you to hold that question for just a second. I don't know if the team has dropped the link to the request for transcript of tax return, and the form number is actually 4506-T. If not, I can drop it into the chat. And somebody did. Thank you, whoever dropped it into the chat. Sorry, jump back into that question.
Sure, let me go ahead and repeat it. What current efforts are in place to combat unlicensed dispensaries in the city of Los Angeles?
So DCR does not have enforcement tools to directly address unlicensed commercial cannabis activity. There are other departments within the city family that actually combat unlicensed activity. DCR does help triage complaints that come in through the DCR complaint portal. Complaints that are submitted that are related to an applicant or licensee are reviewed and handled initially by the Department of Cannabis Regulation. And then for locations where there are complaints that do not have an application or a license, those complaints are referred to LAPD. The mayor's office has a illegal cannabis enforcement task force. That's a working group that includes the police department, fire department, building and safety, water and power, city attorney. DCR also will staff those meetings. That group is working to identify best practices to reduce illegal cannabis activity. It is a multi-department effort. Depending on the type of offense and the severity, LAPD may take an action, DWP may shut off utilities, building and safety may padlock the location. And, these enforcement measures are, running in parallel with the responsibilities of those departments as well. And, depending on the geographic area, depending on what other enforcement measures those departments need to be responsible for in that geographic area, it gets prioritized. And, the city does want to combat unlicensed activity. And I know operating departments are taking actions to help reduce some of that unlicensed activity.
Thanks, Jason. Question from Jose N. When is the Public Convenience and Necessity Program opening in 2025?
Generally, we open up the public convenience or necessity filing period around the same time that we administer the lottery. So I would anticipate that the earliest it would open would be December 2025, or it may open sometime in early 2026.
Another question from Jose. Does a lease have to be active in order to apply for a PCN license?
When you submit your pre-application for land use review, you just have to have the landowner attestation form completed and submitted. You do not have to have an active lease.
Question from Mike S. Does the Cannabis Regulation Commission have the ability to reopen an agenda item that was voted on in a previous hearing at a future hearing?
The simple answer is no. Motion to reconsider an agenda item can only be made on the day that the original commission action was taken.
And then a next question from Ariella J. For licensees who receive confirmation that the renewal application was completed, when will the 2025 temporary approval certificate be issued?
Soon. I think they're going to be issued in the next 2 weeks. The licensing team working with the admin team are finishing up the reconciliations. And then as soon as the reconciled records are done, we'll generate the 2025 temporary approval um, licenses on the records.
Sorry about that. From Amanda R. For a phase 2 licensees whose DCC license will expire within the next 30 days, when will the filed NOE or notice of exemption be provided? The notice of complete application was issued on January 30th.
For that specific question, I would recommend reaching out to your DCR analyst. They can look up your core record number to see where your file is in the process. I mean, based on just the dates you provided, the notice of exemption has most likely already been filed with the county recorder's office, and they mail back a copy of the filed NOEs. And you know how snail mail goes. Sometimes it could take, weeks to get back to our office. So when we get the stamped copy back from the county clerk, we upload that with the supporting documents to the Sequinet, which is the state's website, and we submit a copy to a Dropbox for the DCC. So most likely we already have a stamped copy of your NOE, and or we're just waiting for the paperwork just to catch up. But we are working directly with DCC on the conversion from provisional to annuals. And if your state license is expiring in the next 30 days, I would be confident if you paid your local fees and stuff that your paperwork is getting moved through. But please reach out to your analyst.
Next question from Destiny L. My arrest record is too old for the court to pull up. Can I submit a live scan with a court official stamp and a case number for proof of arrest and conviction?
If that's the only evidence that you can get, go ahead and submit it, and then we'll review it. And if there's any deficiencies or additional information, the current verification process does allow for a 7-day cure period. And then we would notify you of what additional information may be needed. And then you would have that 7-day cure period to address any of the deficiencies. But again, it's hard to on the fly answer a question without seeing the actual document in front of me. The document with the court's official stamp may have sufficient information on it to allow for us to identify that you meet the criteria of cannabis related arrest or a conviction, or it may not. And if it doesn't, then of course we can reach back out to you and let you know what additional information we may need.
A question from Leo L. Is December 31st, 2025, is that date an official date for social equity to end?
The December 31st, 2025 date is in the Los Angeles Municipal Code. The social equity program does not end on that date. We can begin accepting applications for the activities that have been exclusive to social equity applicants after that date. So a social equity record will continue to be a social equity record after December 31st, 2025. But if you were a general applicant and you wanted to apply for a Type 9 non-storefront delivery license, you may be able to do that in January of 2026 because it will no longer be um, an exclusive application type to just social equity applicants.
This next question comes from MS and it refers back to an earlier question. And I can repeat that in a second, but he asks, can you please repeat what you just mentioned about a refiled application being abandoned or ineligible? And let me go back to question 18. Let's see. How would a phase 3 round 1 applicant whose application is abandoned but able to refile if the original applicant entity was originally applied as no longer exists?
A refiled application may only be submitted as the entity on the application that was abandoned. So if an annual license application was filed as ABC LLC and it was abandoned, the refiled record has to be filed as ABC LLC. If a license is issued from that application, then the licensee would have the ability to go through the entity substitution process to transfer that opportunity to a new entity, but a refiled application must be submitted as the entity that was listed on the abandoned application. No ifs, ands, or buts. If the entity was dissolved, you can reach out to the Secretary of State to see if the entity may be reinstated and what that process looks like.
Thank you, Jason. That was the last question in the queue.
I just want to thank everybody for coming and all of the great questions that were submitted today. Quick reminder, the social equity individual applicant verification process, we're going to be closing that filing period at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. From there, we'll do a reconciliation of those records to determine how long it's going to take us to get them processed. Late in April, we will be providing additional information of when the lottery registration period will open, as well as when we anticipate conducting the phase 3 retail round 3 lottery. I know for sure it will be in December of 2025. And our next Q&A virtual lunch will take place on Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025 at noon. So I look forward to answering more questions then. Thank you, everybody. Bye.